185,000 soldiers could not defeat this angel, one of the greatest stories in the Bible. The Bible speaks of God's intervention in the affairs of his people. The story of Hezekiah and his numerous enemies is one of the greatest examples of this. Hezekiah was a man opposite to his terrible father Ahab. During his reign of 8 years, he was granted the unusual honor of doing what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his ancestor David had done. It happened that in the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign and reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. The name of his mother was Abi, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that his father David had done. Kings 18:1. Hezekiah was one of the few kings who supported the high places of worship. He also cut down the idolatrous Asherah poles and destroyed the bronze serpent that Moses had created centuries earlier, known as Nehushtan, meaning bronze image, Numbers 21:8-9. It's a pity that this object God used to deliver the people became a source of worship. For these and other reasons, Hezekiah will be considered a king who distinguished himself and was above other kings due to his adherence to God's commandments. 2 Kings 18-5. Among all the kings of Judah, there was none like Hezekiah. After reading about the unfaithfulness and atrocious acts of so many kings of Israel and Judah, Hezekiah's reign was a relief. His reign prospered wherever he went because the Lord was with him. 2 Kings 18:6-16. In the 4th year of Hezekiah's reign, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, went up against Samaria and besieged it. They took it after 3 years, meaning Samaria was taken in the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel. The king of Assyria took the Israelites captive to Assyria and placed them in Halah, in the river Harbor, and the cities of the Medes, because they did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, but broke his covenant. They did not listen or carry out all the things that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. 2 Kings 18:9-12. In the 14th year of Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent a message to the king of Assyria in Lachish, saying, "I have sinned, withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand." The king of Assyria imposed on Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver found in the house of the Lord and the treasuries of the royal palace. At that time, Hezekiah stripped off the doors of the temple of the Lord and the gold-covered doorposts he had overlaid, and gave them to the king of Assyria. The successor of Shalmaneser, the conqueror of Israel, was the Assyrian king against whom Hezekiah would have to fight. Unfortunately for Judah, things did not go as planned. Sennacherib attacked and conquered all the fortified cities of Judah, leaving only Jerusalem. 2 Kings 18:13-17. It was at this moment that Hezekiah may have realized he had miscalculated the situation. He had previously admitted to Sennacherib that he had acted wrongly and offered a ransom to avoid his people suffering the same fate as Israel. The demand was enormous, and Hezekiah sent all the silver and gold he could find, even taking gold from the temple. However, things were about to get worse. God would surround the Assyrians in Jerusalem to test Hezekiah's faith and demonstrate his power to his people. Sennacherib did not think Hezekiah's ransom was enough or sought a reason to attack Jerusalem anyway. The Assyrian king sent a delegation and a massive army to Jerusalem to demand the surrender of the city. 2 Kings 18:18-31. So Hezekiah, king of Judah, said to the king of Assyria in Lachish, "I have sinned, withdraw from me, and I will pay whatever you demand." The king of Assyria imposed on Hezekiah, king of Judah, 10,000 talents of silver and 1,000 talents of gold. Then Hezekiah gave him all the silver found in the house of the Lord and the treasuries of the royal palace. At that time, Hezekiah dismantled the doors of the temple of the Lord, and the gold-covered doorposts Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave them to the king of Assyria. After that, the king of Assyria sent Tartan, Rabsaris, and Rabshakeh with the mighty army of Lachish to Hezekiah in Jerusalem. They went up and arrived in Jerusalem, stopping at the aqueduct of the upper pool on the road to the washerman's field. Then they called for the king and went out to meet them. Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was in charge of the palace, Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, said to them, "Speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak to us in Hebrew, in the hearing of the people on the wall." But Rabshakeh said, "Has my master sent me to speak these words only to your master and to you? Has he not sent me to the men sitting on the wall, who, like you, will have to eat their excrement and drink their urine?" Then Rabshakeh stood and called out in a loud voice in Hebrew, "Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. He cannot deliver you from my hand. Do not let Hezekiah persuade you to trust in the Lord when he says, 'The Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria.'" 2 Kings 18:32-37. The request of the three men that negotiations be conducted in Aramaic and not in Hebrew was to protect the listeners on the wall from the threats, but the Assyrian spokesman did not care. He wanted everyone to fear the ultimatum of his king. He even threatened the people in Hebrew in the most repulsive way imaginable. Then he warned the people not to believe Hezekiah's promises of the Lord's intervention to save them. How long would the people of Judah continue to trust their king in light of this diatribe? Do not listen to Hezekiah, for this is what the king of Assyria says: "Make peace with me and surrender to me. Each of you will then eat from your own vine and fig tree and drink water from your cistern until I come and take you to a land like your own, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive trees and honey. Choose life and not death. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for he is misleading you." 2 Kings 18:31-32. The spokesman offered peace and prosperity to the people in exchange for their surrender. These words may have sounded attractive to the people of Jerusalem, who were about to be surrounded and isolated from the rest of the world. The Assyrians also unequivocally declared that deportation to a land similar to theirs was part of the deal. They promised a land of grain and new wine, olive trees and honey. Similarly, Satan tempts believers with attractive offers, but sin never fulfills all its promises. Has any of the gods of the nations ever delivered their land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivvah? Have they rescued Samaria from my hand? Who of all the gods of these countries has been able to save their land from me, so that the Lord may save Jerusalem from my hand?" But the people remained silent and did not answer him a word, for the king's command was, "Do not answer him." Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, Shebna, the secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn and told him what the field commander had said. 2 Kings 18:33-37. The speech concluded with several rhetorical questions, essentially stating that the gods of the nations had not saved their followers from the clutches of the Assyrian king, and the Lord would not save Jerusalem either. Furious with this encounter, Hezekiah's men returned to the king with torn clothes from distress. When King Hezekiah heard this, he tore his clothes, covered himself with sackcloth, and entered the house of the Lord. He then sent Eliakim, who was in charge of the palace, Shebna the secretary, and the leaders of the priests, all covered in sackcloth, to the prophet Isaiah, the son of Amos. They delivered a message to Isaiah, saying, "Thus says Hezekiah, this is a day of distress, rebuke, and disgrace, for the children are about to be born, but there is no strength to bring them forth. Perhaps the Lord your God will hear all the words of Rabshakeh, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to mock the living God, and will rebuke the words that the Lord your God has heard. Therefore, lift a prayer for the remnant that is left." 2 Kings 19:1-4. When King Hezekiah heard the report, he did the same as his men. He tore his clothes and sought answers. He must have wondered how such a terrible change had occurred, considering his obedience to God, the renewal of worship in Judah, and his prosperity due to the providence of God. However, God remained silent at that moment, emphasizing that faithfulness to God doesn't shield one from adversity, but prepares them for testing. Hezekiah would have been better prepared to face problems and suffering if he lived his life from a divine perspective, trusting in God in both good and bad times. Despite his anguish, King Hezekiah entered the temple of the Lord to worship. Additionally, he did what many of his predecessors had done. He sent a delegation covered in sackcloth to seek a word from the Lord through the prophet Isaiah. They explained the dire situation in Judah and the mocking of the living God by the Assyrian chief. 2 Kings 19:5-7. Isaiah, already aware of the situation through God's knowledge, provided a message for Hezekiah, starting with the command not to be afraid. This command appears frequently in the Bible as a way for God to calm his people, instill confidence, and assure them that he has everything under control. Isaiah conveyed God's plan to respond to the Assyrian threats. Instead of conquering Jerusalem, King Sennacherib would return to his land and perish by the sword. When Sennacherib learned that the king of Assyria had left Lachish, he returned and found the king fighting against Libnah. Later he heard about Tirhakah, the king of Cush, preparing to fight against him. Sennacherib sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, "Do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you," saying, "Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. You have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands, utterly destroying them. And shall you be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them? The nations that my fathers destroyed, Gozan, Haran, Rezeph, and the people of Eden, who were in Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, the king of the city of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah?" 2 Kings 19:8-13. The royal spokesman of Sennacherib, probably at the walls of Jerusalem, received news that the king had withdrawn his army from Lachish and was fighting in Libnah, 40 kilometers southwest of Jerusalem. Sennacherib learned that the king of Cush, Ethiopia, was preparing to fight against him, diverting his attention from Jerusalem for a while. Sennacherib made it clear to Hezekiah that he would return, repeating the threats made earlier by his subordinate, 2 Kings 19:14-19. Then Hezekiah took the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. He went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord, "O Lord, the God of Israel, enthroned above the cherubim, you are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to mock the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have laid waste the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire. For they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they were destroyed. So now, O Lord our God, save us, please, from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, O Lord, are God alone. 2 Kings 19:14-19. Upon reading the letter, Hezekiah did not tear his clothes in agony. Instead, he took it to the temple, placed it before God, and prayed. Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, the God of Israel, recognizing his supremacy as the creator of heaven and earth. He implored God to listen and see the mocking words sent by Sennacherib. He acknowledged the destruction caused by the Assyrian kings to other nations and their false gods, which were mere human creations and were destroyed. Hezekiah pleaded for God's salvation from Sennacherib's hand, not just for their safety, but so that all the kingdoms of the earth would know that the Lord alone is God. 2 Kings 19:20-19-19. Isaiah, the son of Amos, sent a message to Hezekiah, saying, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, your prayer to me about Sennacherib, king of Assyria, I have heard. This is the word that the Lord has spoken concerning him. She despises you, she scorns you, the virgin daughter of Zion. She wags her head behind you, the daughter of Jerusalem. Whom have you mocked and reviled? Against whom have you raised your voice and lifted your eyes to the heights? Against the Holy One of Israel. By your messengers you have mocked the Lord, and you have said, with my many chariots I have gone up the heights of the mountains, to the far recesses of Lebanon. I felled its tallest cedars, its choicest cypresses. I entered its farthest lodging place, its most fruitful forest. I dug wells and drank foreign waters, and I dried up with the sole of my foot all the streams of Egypt. Have you not heard that I determined it long ago? I planned from days of old what now I bring to pass, that you should turn fortified cities into heaps of ruins, while their inhabitants, shorn of strength, are dismayed and confounded, and have become like plants of the field, and like tender grass, like grass on the housetops, blighted before it is grown. But I know you're sitting down and you're going out and coming in, and you're raging against me. Because you have raged against me and your complacency has come into my ears, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth, and I will turn you back on the way by which you came. 2 Kings 19:20-28. Isaiah conveyed God's response to Hezekiah, assuring him that the prayer had been heard. The message declared that the virgin daughter of Zion, the daughter of Jerusalem, despised and scorned Sennacherib. Hezekiah had mocked and reviled the Holy One of Israel through his messengers, boasting of his exploits. God, through Isaiah, exposed Sennacherib's arrogance and reminded him that his actions were determined and planned by God long ago. Sennacherib's boasts of conquering fortified cities were in vain, as God would turn them into ruins. The inhabitants would be weakened, dismayed and confounded, becoming like plants of the field and tender grass. God, who knew Sennacherib's actions and complacency, would put a hook in his nose and a bit in his mouth, turning him back on the way he came. 2 Kings 19:29-28. God's message continued with a sign for Hezekiah. And this shall be the sign for you. This year eat what grows of itself, and in the second year what springs of the same. Then in the third year sow and reap and plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. And the surviving remnant of the house of Judah shall again take root downward and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem shall go a remnant, and out of Mount Zion a band of survivors. The zeal of the Lord will do this. 2 Kings 19:29-31. The sign given to Hezekiah was that, for the current year, they would eat what grew on its own, and in the second year they would eat what sprang from the same. In the third year they could sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. This sign represented God's assurance that, despite the Assyrian threat and the current limitations preventing them from planting, a remnant of the house of Judah would survive, take root, and bear fruit. The zeal of the Lord would ensure this outcome. 2 Kings 19:29-31. The narrative then describes the miraculous intervention of the angel of the Lord. That night, the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. Then Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went home and lived at Nineveh. And as he was worshipping in the house of Nisroch, his god, Adramelech and Sharezer, his sons, struck him down with the sword and escaped into the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his place. 2 Kings 19:35-37. In a single night, the angel of the Lord struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in their camp. When the people woke up in the morning, they found the entire Assyrian army dead. Sennacherib, recognizing the severity of the situation, departed and returned to Nineveh. Later, while he was worshipping in the house of his god Nisroch, his sons Adramelech and Sharezer killed him with a sword and fled to the land of Ararat. Sennacherib's son Esarhaddon then became king in his place. 2 Kings 19:35-37. This dramatic turn of events demonstrated God's sovereign power over the Assyrian threat and his protection of Jerusalem. It showcased the fulfillment of God's promise to defend the city and preserve the Davidic line for his own sake and the sake of his servant David. The narrative underscores the importance of trusting in the Lord, seeking his guidance in times of distress, and relying on his divine intervention. Despite the overwhelming odds, God's deliverance was complete, and Jerusalem was spared from destruction. We have reached the end of our video, and I hope you like it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment on the video. Continue watching videos about the history of the Bible. I will leave 2 recommendations here on the screen. God bless you. We will get to the next video.